Madruga Forti. I am fortunate to be a member of the ICANN board, and we hope today to have a very interactive session, hearing more from you than from ourselves on all issues of the day at ICANN. This is a forum that is traditionally held at the IGF, and the purpose really is to give you a highlight of those important issues of the day, topics that you will well recognize now into the third day of the IGF, such as accountability, internet governance, the various panels involved in these topics within ICANN, of course, the new top-level domains. So hopefully we will be hearing the state-of-the-moment events that are happening on these topics. And it's very much an interactive event. So we're going to handle this panel a little bit differently. And first, we will hear from our chairman of the board, Steve Crocker, together with ICANN CEO, Fadi Shehadeh. And then we will go immediately to questions and answers from you, followed by an overview by the senior advisor to the CEO, Sally Costerton, on globalization and other events taking place throughout the ICANN community. And finally, Tarek Kamel, senior advisor for international government affairs. So without further ado, well, parentheses, can we get a sense of the room of those of you that are newcomers to ICANN issues, to the ICANN communities, and those that are first newcomers to the issues? Welcome, lovely to have you. And veterans and seasoned practitioners, all others. There you go. And those that will not say, apparently, are the preponderance. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And Steve, please.
Thank you, Olga. And you said you felt yourself fortunate to be a member of the board. I think we are fortunate to have you as a member of the board. So my job here is to set the stage for as wide-ranging a discussion as we'd like to have, starting with a sense of perspective from a year ago. So it's been a pretty active and vigorous year. Last year in Bali, the Snowden revelations were dominating everything and really stirring the pot in terms of internet governance. It has continued to change the whole character of discussion in every quarter, public and private. Some just very indirectly. He, of course, was very focused on surveillance and espionage at ICANN. That's pretty far from anything that we're involved in, certainly quite far from anything we want to be involved in. Nonetheless, the whole issue of governance of all mechanisms related to the internet is a big concern. We're now in September. Back in March, and in April, there were major events. In March, the U.S. Department of Commerce, NTIA, announced that it was planning to transition out of the contractual relationship that it has with ICANN with respect to the oversight of the IANA function. And that set in motion a lot of processes, which I'll come back to. And then followed immediately by NetMundial in Sao Paulo, which provided a brand new venue, brand new stage for discussing internet governance from a multi-stakeholder perspective for all sorts of issues outside of ICANN. And one of the natural questions, what's the relationship of that to IGF, and what's the relationship between ICANN and all of these? Mondial was a big event. How many here were at Mondial? Some, but not everybody. Well, it was a big deal. Others will be much more eloquent at describing how big and important it was. Many journalists, lots of translation on the fly. My notes tell me that 2,000 stories were aired or were published, and that this really focused the world's attention on the idea of multi-stakeholder management and participation in Internet governance. Last week, the World Economic Forum announced that it will facilitate further dialogue in this process that's expected to run for 6 months. ICANN's role in all of this is to be wildly enthusiastic about these things. We have clearly had a substantial role in getting all of this started, and we are equally enthusiastic about stepping back and not being as directly involved, and certainly not being out front on these matters. We have very substantial tasks that are ours and that we need to focus on, and that's where we are. So let me bring us back to our tasks, and in particular the relationship with the U.S. government. I mentioned the announcement from the U.S. Department of Commerce in middle of March. And that is focused on the transition of the stewardship of the IANA function, not the IANA function itself. As that dialogue expanded, and the Department of Commerce asked for a coordinated proposal from the entire community as to how to make that transition and how to do it in a way that is satisfactory to, in principle, everybody, but in practice in some reasonable way. A parallel question came up about, well, to what extent the accountability mechanisms in ICANN appropriate, and how can they be bolstered if they need to be? So there is actually a sort of two-part question there. Do they need to be, and if so, then how? We've taken a very strong hand at trying to facilitate and get those processes started, but step back and have quite vigorous community-led, community-coordinated management of the process, and certainly participation from everywhere. We take accountability quite seriously. We find it in some cases odd that people think that we don't think of ourselves as being accountable. Nothing occupies more of our time, I think, than a bazillion different accountability mechanisms, and we take it all quite seriously. I'm happy to go on at some length about that. And yet nothing's perfect, and we're more than happy to look at ways to improve the process. So those are in progress and under development. We also, during this period, looked at a number of different dimensions about our role and how we operate. And one of the dimensions that we looked at very closely is the notion of public responsibility. We had a major effort looking at the responsibility department, which oversees inside of ICANN that each of the initiatives and all of the activities have a component there and are consistent with what our obligations and objectives are there. Let me bring these remarks to an end by touching on the new GTLD program, which used to be the first thing that we would talk about, and I'm pleased that it no longer is the very first thing, but nonetheless, it's quite a substantial program. Some 370 or expanded even, perhaps. So with that, it's clearly a very exciting period. We're a few weeks away from the next major ICANN meeting in Los Angeles. and that will be our annual general meeting. Also, as a small matter of business, during this period, we've extended the contract with Fadi, who will be with us now for another 3 years, and the nominating committee, and I had very little influence over them, managed to put me back on the board as well for another 3 years. So we have a team effort, and for better or for worse, you either have the benefit or you're stuck with us, and we're pleased to be here.
Thank you very much, Steve. We'll next hear from Fadi Shahade, whom is the CEO of ICANN and also a member of the board. And then we'll have a question and answer session for both of them jointly immediately thereafter.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here. I am Fadi, and I'll share with you some updates on our focus at ICANN at this time. After the London meeting, the board met and asked me to refocus my efforts on the following things. My number one priority is to focus on the transition with the US government. And this easily occupies 40 to 50% of my time and my focus. The second priority is to spend an equal amount of time on ensuring ICANN's operational excellence. And the remaining amount of time, 20–25% of my time, could be dedicated to our external posture in relation to Internet governance matters. And since the board asked me to do this week and one day last week is the only time I focused on Internet governance. My focus has shifted considerably, and you need to know this because I work for you. This is where I'm spending my time. So let me walk you through these three priorities that the board gave me and give you an update where things are. First, on the USG transition. The first thing we did internally to the ICANN staff and organization was to create a structured program in order for us to meet our obligations to you, to the stakeholders, to the global community on achieving this goal. And that internal effort has led to a number of projects. I am personally managing the total program, and it's a significant program. This program is going to be managed like many of us know how programs will be managed, with success factors, performance indicators, budgets, actuals, and reports to the community on where we are with that full project. You will be seeing the beginning of this from us at the Los Angeles meeting of ICANN. And I see Jonathan Zook right in front of me, so metrics, numbers, budgets, tracking, so that you know exactly how the ICANN organization, which belongs to you, the community, is performing its functions and spending money on this USG transition. I must tell you that some of you, I know, and I have failed you on this last year, did not have full visibility, reporting, and certainly that level of, within 24 hours, I hope, announcing the extension of a 21-day public comment period, so all the community can take its time, review the process, give us valuable input, and hopefully after that period we can relaunch, but with unity amongst us. That's my commitment. The second part of my goals and my focus is on the operational excellence area. I do not plan to give you a list right now of all the things we're doing in that regard. However, I'm happy to tell you the following. Major focus is being put by myself and the global leaders on ensuring ICANN's operational excellence. We must operate like an institution that the world can count on. And that means an effective institution, a fair institution, and as my chairman says, an institution with empathy. And we are working towards that. I will only mention one thing that I will give you a preview about, but in Los Angeles, I promise to give you a lot more detail on it. I'm not quite ready to do it today, and my 10 minutes are almost up. We are building a new framework for financial and organizational responsibility, which will ensure that when ICANN is embarking on a major new initiative, that we do not start until we have completed a full fiscal assessment, a full organizational assessment, a full community assessment, and then presented these to our stakeholders and made our stakeholders part of that decision process. We are studying this with the board next week, trying to design how we will do this with you to ensure that the trust between the ICANN organization and its stakeholders is strengthened, and that we do not embark on new things that we are not aligned about and understand their impact on the fiscal, organizational, and all over the activities of ICANN. That's just one example of a small area we're developing now. We will review it with the board and with all of you in LA before we implement it, hopefully next year. Let me close with my 20% of internet governance. My commitment to you on internet governance is the following. My board asked me, and correctly so, that it's time for ICANN to step from a leadership role to a participant role in the global internet governance space. Our number one job is to serve our stakeholders within the remit you gave us, the remit of ICANN. Is it important for ICANN to participate in internet governance? Of course, we are one of many. But in the last year, ICANN took some leadership in some areas like Net Mundial in Sao Paulo and other fora that took place. It is time for ICANN to step back, to participate, but not lead. And that's the posture we're taking. My only comment on this area of work will be about Net Mundial. You've heard last week that the World Economic Forum has agreed to help in the area of internet governance. I think there has been some confusion about the role they will play. Let me set that a little bit clear. I don't know that I'll set it straight, but let me at least clarify it a little bit. There are two roles the World Economic Forum will play. They are distinct and completely separate, and I would like to clarify them so all of us participate, hopefully, in the success of this initiative. The first role they will play is of an incubator for 6 months only of 4 projects that require all of us to participate in them. And these are projects to advance the agenda that was set in Sao Paulo, in Brazil. So we took 4 things from the roadmap of Sao Paulo, and the World Economic Forum, ICANN, CGI, others, we're going to work together to enable these 4 projects with full participation by the community. The WEF's role is simply to be like an enabler and a secretariat, not to own, run, or enable these. In fact, every one of the 4 projects is sponsored by somebody else. ICANN will sponsor 1, CGI will sponsor 1, Harvard and the network of centers, including their partners here who are with us, Dr. Kassar here, Layla Kassar from Turkey, they will participate in 1 project, and of course the GovLab in New York with MIT and New York University, they will sponsor a project. All the WEF and ICANN will do is to enable, not run or own or lead even. And I think that's a good thing. The second thing the WEF will do is completely separate from that. The WEF will energize the subject of internet governance within their own community. And that's a good thing. How could we be against any community energizing the subject of internet governance using the multi-stakeholder principles that we all believe in? And I think The decision of the WEF to do that within their community is a good thing. And they've invited some of us to inform their community, and that's a good thing too. They're not doing it in a vacuum. They asked us to help them. I will clarify why this is important for all of us. 2 reasons. One, we need global leaders on the business and government side who are present in WEF communities to understand our model. If they do, they won't surprise us next year at the GA Assembly in New York and say, we don't know what is multi-stakeholder internet governance. We want them to make the right decisions about the IGF. We want them to make the right decisions as to enhance cooperation and where we are. Informing them in the circles of the WEF cannot hurt. It can only help. And the second thing the WEF will do, which we have not been able to achieve well, not even here at the IGF, is that they will involve a lot of other industries. They're inviting CEOs of financial sector, CEOs of manufacturing sectors, CEOs of energy sectors. With the internet permeating all industries, it is good to have these industries also aware of why the internet should be governed in a multi-stakeholder way. So that's a good thing. And that's in their community. It does not interfere with what we do. It only complements and adds to what we do. Let's welcome it and thank them for that commitment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fadi. As we can see, it's an extraordinarily dynamic and historic time at ICANN right now. So we've heard from our chairman and CEO about issues relating to U.S. government transition, new GTLDs, operational excellence, budget, accountability, transparency. So we welcome now your questions on these topics. I think that we have a roving mic, and our first question is up front here. Microphone to the gentleman in the 4th floor, please. And if I can have you state your name and affiliation, if any.
My name is Sunil Abraham, and I work at the Center for Internet and Society in India. I'm unable to distinguish the difference between the multi-stakeholder model and open and consultative self-regulation. And when I read the NetMundial document, I wasn't able to understand it at all, because all it said was that internet governance should be this, and internet governance should be that. It didn't clarify to me how the various stakeholders would self-regulate and enforce this soft norm that has emerged from the multi-stakeholder model. So the question to ICANN is, since the endorsement of NetMundial document, what within ICANN has changed to be in compliance with the promises made in the NetMundial outcome document? Thank you.
You're speaking about the NetMundial statement that came out of Sao Paulo. Okay. I think the first thing I would like to share with you is that some of the recommendations of that statement was to create, in fact, a lot of the things you're asking for. They're missing today. There are many things we do in the multi-stakeholder community, I would say, by tradition. You remember that, for example, the Indian representatives in Sao Paulo were very genuinely having difficulty understanding the decision-making process. I mean, they were trying, but they were saying, we just don't understand how you make decisions. And frankly, if they asked me to produce a clear statement of how we make decisions, I would have had difficulty doing this. So one of the outcomes of the statement is we need to actually start thinking about how to formalize this. And so one of the 4 projects that was announced in Geneva last week is indeed a project which involves Harvard and 13 other universities, to start developing, frankly, these frameworks. How is decision-making done? What are the legal frameworks for these things to be done properly? How do we form groups that are legitimate, that can make decisions? So a lot of that is in formation. It is not in place yet here today. So we're still in the early stages of absorbing all of that, of actually engaging in developing an understanding that hopefully we can share with the world. The technical community has done things, I think, with good products for many years, but now the subject of internet governance is far bigger than the technical community. It now will involve models of governance and institutions and people in a much broader way. And therefore we need to develop some better frameworks to do that. And that's one of the key requests or outcomes of Net Mundial. And we're working on it today. We are contributing to that understanding and that effort. And I hope that these things, as they evolve, will not only be useful to others, they will also be useful to all of us, including ICANN. Okay?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. There's probably an understanding of what a multi-stakeholder process is can be as varied as there are types of governments around the world. So thank you. Next question. Follow up? Sure.
So the way I understood the response is that nothing has been done so far, and that whatever is going to be done is going to happen outside ICANN by other collaborators. And when I looked at that list of projects announced at the Net Mundial initiative, none of them would result in the regulation of a particular stakeholder category. Corporations and governments, which are the biggest sources of harm on the internet today to the public interest and to human rights, will not be regulated as a result of any of those initiatives. My second question is to compare the transparency mechanisms in ICANN versus the Right to Information Act in India. And I think there are some similarities, but there are also important differences. I posed a question at APRI IGF asking for details of a list of legal entities that give money to ICANN and how much money they give to ICANN every year, historical data so that we can do analysis as a research organization. My query was then forwarded to the ICANN CFO, and it's been a month since I have been following up, and I haven't gotten a response to my question yet. If this was a public information officer in the Indian government, and if we were talking about compliance to the Right to Information Act, that public information officer would be expected to pay a daily fine for every day of delay for not answering the question asked by the public over a 1-month period. So surely the multi-stakeholder model has improved over state-centric governance in the past, but also there are a lot of valuable lessons that the multi-stakeholder organizations can learn from states, especially in terms of accountability to the public, since in reality you are a monopoly serving a public function. Thank you.
Thank you, and make sure you send me the fine, the invoice. We'll pay it in due time. We pay on time. First of all, on your first statement, you're incorrect. We're not just doing things outside of ICANN, we're doing things that will affect the whole ecosystem, including ICANN. And we're doing them with others as opposed to on our own. So one way to do accountability is to all go in a room and say we're going to be more accountable, or involve some of the best minds in the world to come and think together on how we can all improve our accountability, frankly, including the ones of our states. The second question you ask is, you want to know who gives us money. Certainly, I mean, we received the request and we will respond to the request. And there is clear, absolute understanding where ICANN gets its money. It's from the registrants. and that's it. When people get websites, they pay us. We don't get money from any government. We don't get money from any other source other than the people that actually buy websites. And that's pretty clear since 17 years, but we'll certainly, and most of it comes from the gentleman right behind you, so you can ask him as well. So most of it comes from VeriSign because of .com, right? And we have a very simple model of collecting money from the CCTLDs, but it's agreed with the CCTLDs, and it's voluntary. It's completely voluntary. We do not impose any fees on the country top-level domains, right, the CCTLDs. So look, accountability is in nature. It's a way of functioning. We are committed to it. God knows, as our chairman said, we have done a lot of things towards that. And we have just opened a process to do more of that. Since clearly this is important to you, by all means, please join that process, inform us, guide us, enlighten us, and criticize us. This way we can improve our accountability. We're committed to that. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Fadi. I think we have 3 more questions, and then we'll close this set. There will be an opportunity at the end to address a variety of questions. So we have the next question up front here in the first row, I believe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fadi Shahadi. You are a very good speaker. Very good. I congratulate you. You are